Thursday. So depending on your luck, you get me or otherwise. But what I'm doing is giving a little bit of a journey through some different values that come from Buddhism, starting with ones that are apparently quite simple and moving on to more sophisticated or esoteric ones. So as it's a Tuesday, I won't go too hardcore on you, especially as I have already given half of this talk in a way. So what I'm doing is to give the remaining half. And if you are a person who's interested in TV dramas, then you'll probably be quite aware that most of the storylines are to do with mysteries concerning people who we trust, but we later find out are trying to deceive us in some way, right? Yes, it seems to be the sort of standard storyline for most dramas. You know, everyone who you take into your confidence, later you find out they're the person you should not be trusting at all. Sound familiar? Well, it's not just TV dramas. Actually, it's a real life thing that maybe we think that in Britain everyone's a nice person and no one would ever do those nasty things they do in the dramas. But unfortunately, real life means that there's all sorts of people in the world, and sometimes they look just like you or me. So it's not by their personal appearances that you can tell very easily about the sort of people who might influence your sense of well-being and destiny in life, for the better or for the worse. And what I was saying last time I saw you on this subject, which was last Thursday, was that when we are looking to pick up good influences from the world around us, the thing that really counts for us, whether we are young or old, tends to be the other people who we are close to in our human milieu or environment. The sort of people who we look up to or we use as our sort of benchmark for what is normal and acceptable in life tend to be the major influence on what we think is normal or desirable in life. And certain people, like these ones, okay, you might already be suspicious just by the way they behave. And you would be right in looking at people's behavior, especially their habitual behavior, as something which would red flag the sort of person who might be a negative influence on you. Especially if you are starting out on your spiritual journey and you are looking for people who are going to be a positive influence from whom you can start to get a few of the sort of personal qualities that will help you to improve and become better or your best self as a person, then you need to watch out for the ones who will influence you in the opposite direction. And technically speaking, within Buddhism, such people are benignly known as fools. Although you might say that's a bit of an understatement for the influence some of these people might have on you. But if you think of the sort of words like grooming or words like manipulation, then that would probably come closer to the way certain people in the world might affect you if you don't guard against it. So we're thinking mostly about people who are not genuine in their friendship towards us, because they can have a major influence on our ability to meditate well or to follow a spiritual pathway of self-improvement. So, how would you recognize such people? As I said, it's not just down to appearances, but it's more to do with the way they habitually behave, speak, and think. So here are a few telltale signs that might be helpful. Firstly, you can tell quite a lot about a person by what they persuade the people around them to do. So, you might not see them doing something, but you might see that they are persuading people to do something which is dodgy, which ought to set alarm bells ringing. No matter what that person looks like, but if the things they're persuading you to do seem to go against your better judgment, it's likely that you're dealing with one of these fools. Secondly, they tend to interfere in things which are none of their business. So in modern day parlance, you might say they have no sense of boundaries. And a third thing is that they tend to relish doing anything that goes against the grain. So it might be betting or drugs or cage fighting, anything which is the opportunity to throw a spanner in the works, or a wrench, as they say in the United States. Anything that will leave a trail of enemies behind them. If such people, they become a monk, then they even cause problems in the monkhood, because they tend to create major disharmony and schisms in the monastic community. If you are in a position where you think you can lean in and help such people, then again you might be mistaken, because such people are very determined in the things that they do. In fact, they may be so determined that they don't want to be helped, in which case you really would be wasting your time trying to help them. So even if you are by nature a very well-intentioned person, a person who is compassionate and can't stand to see other people suffering or having problems, then they can be a major drain on your resources, even as a fairly practiced helper. And I'm going to tell you a little story to illustrate the point. It's called the story of the angel and the worm. So, I could only find the angel picture. Okay. So, a long time ago, there were two young men who were friends. And how they came to be friends, nobody knew, because one was very upstanding and enjoyed helping other people and doing charitable works, whereas the other one did only unwholesome things. All their life, whether it be cockfighting or fish fighting or taking drugs and coming home drunk. And when he was a storekeeper, he would only sell rip-offs and stolen goods. When he was a teacher, he wouldn't teach the normal subjects to his pupils, he would teach them how to get away with murder. And even with such different tastes, these two guys managed to keep up their friendship until eventually both of them passed away from this world. And when the good guy died, he was reborn as an angel in heaven. And one day he was wondering where his friend had got to. So the angel surveyed the whole of the heaven, and he couldn't find his friend anywhere. So then he went and he checked out the whole of the human realm. But again, his friend was nowhere to be found. So the angel made a further check and was very surprised to find that his friend had been born as a worm in a toilet bowl. And the angel wondered what he could do to help his friend. So the angel held his nose and tolerated the sickening smell and made his way out of compassion to the very edge of the toilet bowl and made himself back to his original appearance and greeted his friend. "Old friend, do you remember me?" "Of course," said the worm. We used to be friends a long time ago." "Oh, worm," said the angel, "today I have come to do the biggest favor of your life. I've come to invite you to join the heavenly host. However, there's one condition. If you want to be an angel, you have to behave properly from now on. You mustn't break any of the 5 precepts, which you know, right? 5 precepts? So you mustn't kill, you mustn't steal, you mustn't be unfaithful to your lawfully wedded, you mustn't tell lies, and you mustn't take any intoxicants. And before long, you'll be able to live in the same level of heaven as me." "So, what's so great about being an angel?" asked the worm. And the angel said, very patiently, "You can get whatever you wish for instantly, just by thinking about it. So if you think of food, then ambrosia manifests itself. If you think of clothing, then instantly you are clothed in angelic raiment. And if you think of a heavenly mansion, then a heavenly mansion arises instantaneously. And all you have to do is make the intention, and hundreds of good things will come into your life." So the worm said, "In that case, I don't want to be an angel, because I'm better off as a worm, thank you." "And what do you mean?" asked the angel. And the worm continued, "Well, if you're an angel, then you have to make the wish before you get what you want. But as a worm, people come along, they raise the lid of the toilet, and they give me exactly what I want all day long, even without having to make a wish first. So just leave me alone, because I'm better off as a worm." So because of the fixed idea which people of this certain sort of nature have of what is normal and desirable in life, it's often beyond the effort of normal people to convince them otherwise, or to offer a helping hand, because they just don't want that help. Fourth one, I think, which is a feature, is that they we're down to number 4 here. Even if you speak to them decently, they get angry. So anger, righteous anger, sometimes is seen as a good thing. Not so much in this country, more in America. Yeah, America like to stamp about a bit. So even spoken to decently, losing one's temper, generally not a good sign. Why? Because it reflects the quality of the mind underneath. Putting on an act of being angry, that's another thing. Teachers know about this, I think. You go through the act of being angry is okay, but actually be angry, generally not a good thing. And if people come and give you possibly good advice and you get angry with them, then your chances are that you will not improve yourself very much. And lastly, they tend not to comply with rules and regulations. Sometimes people balk a little bit at having a lot of rules and regulations, but if everyone was the exception to the rule, then it would be a major problem. Everyone thinks that the rules are for everyone else but them to keep, then it tends to be a problem. And that sort of person is what we're talking about here. So, the way people tend to be manipulative in their friendship tends to take 4 different facets. Sometimes they are only into friendship in order to exploit you in some way. So, although everyone likes to have lots of friends, right? Especially on Facebook. But if you have friends who are only your friend in order to take advantage of you, yeah, generally you wouldn't encourage that too much. The way people tend to be rather mercenary in their approach to us tends to be that they try to help themselves to our possessions. They may sacrifice little in the hope of gaining much, give you little meaningless gifts in the hope that you're going to give them back something much more valuable. They only help you if they're threatened by the same danger, and they only make friends to serve their own interests. So people who tend to hang around the great and the good in the hope that they will be advantaged at the same time, but they usually forget about the same people whenever they fall on hard times. Second quadrant, is to do with empty promises. Such people tend to be the ones who tell you how sad they are not to have been able to share something which has already run out. So on the way here, they had really wonderful ice creams. Unfortunately, it all melted before we got to you, for example. Or they tell you about things that they don't yet have, which they would like to share with you. So neither of those are very much use, right? And they tend to try to win your favor with empty promises. And anytime you ask for their help, then they've always got some excuse why they can't help you. Not good, right? Next comes the flatterer. We all like compliments, but sometimes it can not be very helpful, especially if we are in the business of self-improvement. What we would actually like is honest advice, possibly criticism that's going to help us become a better person. So if you're in with someone who flatters you, generally that is not a very productive environment for self-improvement, especially if we're starting off on the bottom rung of the spiritual ladder when we still have a lot to improve in ourselves. So the way flatterers tend to treat us is that if we do things which are bad or reckless, then they go along with it. And if we do something good, then they go along with that too. So whatever we do, they're going to go along with it. They're just going to suck up to us, whatever. They're not going to protect us if we're doing something really stupid. Usually a friend will step in if we're doing something really reckless, if they're really our friend. If not, then they just sort of tagger along. They will praise you to your face, but they will gossip about you behind your back. So, generally, not a good sign. And there's a set of things in Buddhism known as the roads to ruin, which are generally things which are of a nature of slippery slopes, that if you get in at the thin end, then it will pull you further in a way that you're no longer in control. So things in this category you might think of as addictive substances, where you start out with gateway drugs of various sorts and it pulls you further in. But that's not the only thing. There are other things which are similar in their effects. And any friend that encourages you to get mixed up in those things, generally it is a sign that you shouldn't be associating with people like that. So, drinking, roaming the streets at unseemly hours, which is a euphemism for what? Can you tell me? Someone told me, oh, can I roam the streets at different hours? Would that make a difference? It's a euphemism for red light districts. And gaming and shows, sometimes known as sport junkies, and last but not least, gambling of various sorts. So anyone who gets you mixed up in those things, you'd be better to avoid the person before it leads any further. So in the old days, the word grooming had quite a positive connotation. For example, pampering a pet, or preparing someone for a leading position in office somewhere, being groomed to be the next prime minister or whatever. These days, the word has taken a different quality to it, a more scary meaning. And there's a sense of foreboding, which is rather similar to the sense of the fool, who may come in many guises. It said that you should keep a safe distance from things which are dangerous to us. So, like a fierce dog, maybe we wouldn't come too close, right? But for a person who is a manipulator, or a person who might groom us in ways that are not positive, then sometimes we cannot avoid there's no distance which is not enough for us to put between us and them. But the distance I'm talking about is not like shunning a person by like walking around them at a distance. It's more of a psychological distance. And keeping ourselves out of harm's way, we should avoid getting too close in a way that they can start to interfere in things that are sensitive for us. Some people wonder what to do, especially if they're in a situation where they can tell a person is treating them like that, but they have to be in close proximity to that person. What can one do then? And in this sense, there is something known as interaction without transaction, where at all possible, which is what I would mean by keeping one's psychological distance from a person. Let's say you work in the same place as a person who you recognize as being a bad influence on you or your future. You can greet them, you can talk about the weather with them, but maybe you wouldn't want to lend them money. Can you see how that might go? You wouldn't want to get into something which you can't just end at any time. And in this sense, there's 3 words which often help to remind ourselves about getting in too deep with people who potentially might influence us in a bad way. Joining, receiving, and giving. So joining up with a person who is a fool might mean eating with them, residing with them, or investing with them. Not receiving fools might mean not dating them, or not adopting them, or not employing them, or otherwise letting them get their feet under your table. And not giving things to them means that you might not consider them for particular influential positions. You might not praise them, you might not encourage them. You might not give them payments or food or lodging without being very careful indeed. If you do find you're getting in too deep, then you might need to redraw your boundaries to save yourself future trouble. So we are all nice people, and we can dismiss all those other nasty people out there who are fools and keep our distance, right? And we are safe. And unfortunately, there is a more subtle meaning of the fool, which none of us can avoid so easily. And although we might have enough ability and enough wits about ourselves to be able to choose our friends, We might think that everything I've been talking about to do with all the roads to ruin and gambling and grooming and manipulation, that's for other people who get in the news. It's nothing to do with nice people like ourselves. But in fact, there is a level of meaning where even the word fool and not associating with fools has meaning for us, especially as meditators. And this is where we find that the fool is not only out there in the world around us, but we actually have some degree of the fool inside our own head or inside our own mind. And we tend to notice the interference of such an influence in our lives when we have voices in our head giving us advice about what we should or should not do in any particular situation. In other words, we still have an inner fool to contend with, which, if you want to characterize it, might be like the little devil sitting on one shoulder, which is trying to put up an argument to drown out the little angel sitting on the other shoulder. Whenever you come across dilemmas, especially ethical dilemmas in your own life. So the inner fool in any particular person is this sort of erroneous discretion, which might creep into our heads against our better judgment. Especially when we're meditating and we're trying to work with the mind to get it to be still and focused and one-pointed and to go deeper and to cast off all the negative influences in our lives, then we find that we're working against some sort of force in our mind which is trying to pull us in the opposite direction. It's like we're working against resistance the whole time. And you could say that this is the influence of the inner fool within ourselves, which we are also having to contend with. So what can we do even on the inside of ourselves to avoid the influence of such an inner voice which is not leading us in a good direction? The first thing is that we need to be quite careful, especially if we have a past or demons that we are dealing with from our past, not to relapse into any of those forms of unwholesomeness that have brought us grief in the past. So if you recognize you have a problem, then you should realize that you have blind spots that you can't afford to overlook or to be reckless about, and not to slip back into those old bad habits. Secondly, make a break. Don't dwell on your past demons. Sometimes you might think talking about it with someone would be a great thing, but sometimes if you talk about it, it brings it up all over again. So that may not be constructive for some people. Thirdly, if you've turned over a new good leaf in your life, then try to make that good stuff continuous. Don't leave any breaks, otherwise our mind has empty spaces into which the little fool in our mind can start to insert some ideas of its own. Fourthly, if you have to associate with people who have that same quality of influencing us to go back to old bad habits that we used to have, then we should try to keep those people at an arm's length. The friends that used to take us drinking or whatever. And if you do have to associate with such people, or you're tempted to try to help them out, you want to be, let's say, a sponsor to someone else who's having a problem, then you need to be very careful that you are actually strong enough to be able to help them. Otherwise, like I gave the metaphor last time, jumping in the water to save a drowning person when you can't swim yet, you get 2 drowning people instead of just the one. So you make the problems worse. So these are some of the things which we need to look out for, even for the voice in our own head. And there's a particularly interesting teaching in Buddhism concerning this inner fool, which tells us 3 levels which we need to watch out for. First is, even small things can have danger in them. Small things, things that we would normally overlook, sometimes in those things there can be danger. Just because they're small doesn't mean that they are things that we can ignore. Similar to a small snake or a small spark in a flammable building, we can't overlook those things, or we can't afford to overlook them. But some people, even though they see the danger in those things, they ignore it. So that is one step worse. If you find yourself overlooking things almost intentionally, then you know that that's an extra layer of problems which you're having to deal with. A third thing is, even when other people point out that you've overlooked something, you still ignore them as well. So your second safety net has also been ignored as well. So if you find yourself on any of those 3 levels, then you know that you're dealing with something quite stubborn in yourself which needs to change. So for today, I will finish off by saying that here at the Dhammakaya Meditation Center in Woking, we have classes now in person every Tuesday evening between 7 and 8:30, and every Thursday evening between 7 and 9. The Tuesday evening, it's a slightly shorter meditation. On the Thursday, it's a little bit longer, and there's more chance for questions at length. Also, if traveling is not convenient for you, on Saturdays, there's an online Zoom meditation, which is conducted from here, but with people joining in from all over Europe. And from time to time, last Tuesday we tried it for the first time, we do a full moon meditation, which has a little bit more of a ceremonial aspect of lighting candles and stuff alongside our meditation. The next one to take place here will be on Thursday the 21st of October, and it will be themed to do with the end of Buddhist Lent. So more candle lighting, but we will see how we can weave that into our meditation. And for those of you who liked the meditation today and feel that it did you some good, I would encourage you to meditate a little every day if you can. Normally for grown-ups, I would recommend a minimum of 20 minutes per day. If you're not quite there at the grown-up stage, then take your age and multiply that by the number of minutes, and that would be a good length of time to meditate each day. In this respect, there is also a free app which you can get on your mobile phone called MindGem. You can download that for free, and there'll be lots of audio tracks there which will lead you through a meditation together with a timer. So it's like a free version of Headspace. And there's a variety of monks' teachings on that, actually leading through the meditation, or talks about meditation in theory. Yes, so I would encourage you, that would be a good way to establish a habit in your life so that the meditation you have becomes a habit and a part of your daily life in a way that it will boost the level of mindfulness in your life rather than being just something you do as a hobby once a week. Yes. So for today, I think I will leave it there. Unless Mr. Champ wants to host any questions, comments, or feedback at this point.
Okay. So, okay, all right. Feedback.
You want to ask them if they want to ask a question?
Do they have any question or anything to ask the Venerable Nicholas? Oh, didn't hear me. Okay. Okay, I speak louder. So, do you have any question to ask the monks for the meditation or anything about today? All right. Okay. No question now. Okay.
If not, then we will. Sorry. Oh, we have a question. Okay. Yes, YouTube has it
Oh,
um,
right.
with all the warts. Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. So this is also on YouTube in case any of that wasn't detailed enough for you. Yeah.
Okay, so nothing now.
You know the YouTube page of this meditation center. You look up what Phra Dhammakaya London, because this is walking is sort of in London, right?
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it's what you see written at the back there. That's the name of the YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's them. โอเคครับก็ไม่มีงั้นก็ Okay ครับงั้น so yeah if not any questions so may I invite everyone to pay respect to venerable monks by bowing 3 times bow bow bow.
So may all of you be blessed with happiness, success, prosperity in life, and as you continue to cultivate your meditation, may you attain inner peace easily, now and forevermore.
Sadhu. Okay, and thank you everyone for joining the meditation class for today. If you have any donation, we have the donations box on the table, and you can bring the water if you want the water to drink more water. And before going back home, I need your help to clean the chair. So with the paper. Okay, and thank you for today. And have a nice evening. Sadhu ครับ Okay. Okay, so now we pay. May I invite everyone to pay respect to the Lord Buddha by bowing 3 times. Bow, bow, bow. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much.